from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the president optimistic in his quest for trade deals.
We're very close to finishing a trade deal, big trade deal, actually. And we do a lot of business with you. It's a lot of income coming in for both groups.
The developments from the White House tonight after the president's sit-down with Philippines leader Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and the trade agreement the two heads of state hammered out, in addition to a pact with Indonesia just out with only 10 days until that all-important August 1st deadline.
Plus, how the president's tariff plans are starting to show an earnings season, the impact we're seeing in the defense space. As a number of Trump appointees, including his pick to be the next deputy U.S. trade representative, is considered by the Senate. More with former USTR Susan Schwab coming up.
Also tonight, House Democrats implode Republicans' agenda leading into the August recess with just a handful of legislative days left before a potential government shutdown. We'll speak with Congressman Jake Auchincloss for more up ahead.
And the steps Congress is taking to obtain testimony from former Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell as the DOJ seeks a meeting with the convicted sex offender. What comes next in the political fight gripping Washington when Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina joins us here. But we begin tonight with the trade agreements announced by President Trump earlier today. He took to Truth Social, posting about two frameworks, one with the Philippines and another with Indonesia, posting in part, quote, "The Philippines is going open market with the United States and zero tariffs. The Philippines will pay a 19% tariff. In addition, we will work together militarily." The president also then went on to say Indonesia will supply the U.S. with critical minerals. Joining us now for more from the White House is Bloomberg's Jennifer Dlouhy. Jen, it's good to see you, and thanks so much for being here. Beyond the top line rates, have we learned anything else about what's actually in these trade frameworks?
Well, on the Philippines, what you've outlined and what the president really put out in his social media post earlier today after meeting with that country's president is really the extent of what we know. For instance, we don't really know much about the terms of military collaboration between the two countries or really what open market will mean in that context. But on the Indonesia deal, we did see the president come out and the White House come out with more details on the deal that the president actually first announced a week ago. This is kind of becoming par for the course with the president, where he announces the bare bones of a deal and then it's only fleshed out, if not signed, weeks and weeks later. On the Indonesia deal, we learned that in addition to there being this 19% tariff on Indonesian goods, the country will remove some barriers to U.S. products. They will accept, for instance, cars that are certified to meet U.S. federal motor vehicle standards. They will accept pharmaceuticals and medical devices that have gotten pre-clearance from the FDA, and they're going to lift export curbs on critical minerals. So all of these are details that we hadn't heard about yet and were provided essentially in a joint statement between the two countries. It's important to note this is still not a final deal. They're still subject to, the terms of this are still subject to deliberations and negotiations. There'll have to be a formal signing. All of that is to come later. Some suggestion today from the White House that will be several weeks away as we approach, of course, this August 1st deadline for all of the trade tariffs and the reciprocal tariffs that the president has outlined.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many more deals or framework agreements we're going to get here, Jennifer, but we do see a bit of a trend, certainly in these deals, where it's a complete reversal. Both of these countries we talked about, the Philippines and Indonesia, get 19%. There's zero tariff on U.S. goods. So this isn't apparently about zeroing out the playing field. It's about reversing the current gap we have with countries. Does that inform what else we might learn with further deals ahead?
Well, I think the president and his advisors have been very clear that what's important for the U.S., what's really important here, is dealing with what they consider this trade emergency, this, balance of trade problem that they see with so many of the U.S. trading partners. It's interesting, the Philippines deal actually has varied quite significantly from that first Liberation Day tariff that was announced in April. It was dropped down. It was threatened again to go higher with the letter just recently, and today's rate essentially is 1 point lower than what was expected. So what countries are finding is it's difficult to negotiate. The terms are varied and flexible, and I think we see that today.
So they both talked him down 1 percentage point, I guess is the story. Bloomberg's Jennifer Dlouhy live from the White House. Jen, thank you so much for the great reporting today, and joining us now for more insight into these newly announced agreements with the Philippines and Indonesia, Susan Schwab, former U.S. trade representative in the George W. Bush administration. She's now strategic advisor at Mayer Brown LLP. Susan, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm supposed to ask you questions about these deals, but they're not actually deals, and we have so little in terms of detail to talk about. I'm wondering what you think about these so-called framework arrangements, knowing that the White House had promised 90 deals in 90 days. Is this progress?
Oh, it's definitely progress, but none of us can be sure exactly how much progress. The 90 deals in 90 days concept obviously was not going to happen. The UK deal is the only one where we actually have any paper, and that is a framework agreement. The China deal, there's some paper, and that is a work in progress, as we know. The others, we have a social media post. We don't even have a White House press release. We don't have anything from the other countries. So those are works in progress. Some of them look like they've got some good potential in terms of market access for U.S. exporters, in terms of the trading partners either dialing back existing discriminatory treatment, say in the digital services space, or anticipated discriminatory treatment in, again, digital cross-border content in terms of trade barriers. A lot of interesting potential, but we don't have any details on any of them. So that's a bit of a challenge. And on the other side, we expect to have higher barriers for products coming into the U.S. market, which is going to be obviously injurious to a lot of importers, whether they're manufacturers that import intermediate products or the ultimate U.S. consumer. And so we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And we know that those, quote, reciprocal tariffs, which really aren't reciprocal tariffs, that they will be compounded by the day-to-day drip, drip, drip of the Section 232 national security tariffs, which keep showing up. And we don't know how these agreements will treat those additional tariffs.
Well, I actually wanted to follow up on that because I've been absolutely fascinated how the Section 232 tariffs enacted on the basis of national security concerns have really come into the conversation for the so-called reciprocal tariffs, which are enacted on a totally separate legal basis here when we're talking about IEEPA and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Can you just give us some context here? Is this because when it comes to the sector-specific tariffs, this is where the U.S. holds more leverage? Why is this now making its way into the conversation in such a meaningful way?
Well, I think this has been a dual-track process really almost right from the beginning. So if you think about the Section 232 tariffs, that is a statute that the Trump administration started using in its first term. So in its first term, it imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum and thought about doing it on cars. During the Biden administration, they left those tariffs in place, and there was a judicial court process that concluded that it was okay for national security purposes for the Section 232 tool to be used. And so coming back in his second term, the Trump administration has decided that is a wonderful tool. And there are a whole slew of Section 232 cases that have either been announced or are moving through the pipeline. So the Section 232 case on steel and aluminum, it's now steel and aluminum, and they've added derivative products. He increased the steel and aluminum tariffs from 25% to 50%. We now have dozens of derivative products and a process for adding more and more and more. There are now something like 945 different products under consideration and a process to look at new products every year. So in conjunction with that, you have the IEEPA tariffs going in parallel. Those are country-specific as distinct from sector-specific.
Well, I want to ask you about the market reaction or lack thereof. Susan, I don't know if you are able to rationalize this for us, but we're seeing the S&P 500 notch new highs recently, just 2 weeks, now a week and a half, almost ahead of the August 1st deadline. I talked about this earlier today on the early edition of Balance of Power with Doug Rediker. with international capital strategies. He's got a real concern about a looming reckoning when this deadline hits. Let's listen.
Do I expect more deals? Deals in that amorphous sense, maybe kind of, sort of, yes. Yeah. But I'm very worried that the markets broadly have just become overly complacent, overly sanguine, either because they don't really fully appreciate the impact that is forthcoming, or because they go back to the taco trade and they think, well, Trump's going to back down in a matter of days anyway, therefore let's just go on our August break. I'm just not sure that's going to be a great strategy, at least in the short term.
Do you feel that confusion, Susan? How should investors be looking at this?
So I guess I would agree with Doug. And I think, however, there are two different paths here that we could see evolving. One is the path that we're on right now, assuming the administration is successful, is a path where on or around August 1, we're going to find ourselves with 15 to 20% tariffs on imports from just about every country that come, every country that we do business with. And those are the ones where we've reached trade agreements. That doesn't count countries where we haven't reached trade agreements and there is retaliation, and we put up tariffs and there's retaliation. So that's not good news, and I'm not sure the market's going to react well to that. And on top of that, as we just discussed, you've got the Section 232 tariffs. The other scenario, which in a way for me is even more concerning, is the frog in the pot of boiling water, which is the evolving, in a way, what we're doing right now, which is, you get one sector added tariffs, the next sector added tariffs. We've got steel, aluminum, copper, we've got wood, pharmaceuticals. Recently, we've got a new, copper was announced. The president's talking about 200% tariffs on pharmaceuticals. They most recently announced investigations on drones and polysilicon. They've talked about, we know autos and auto parts are part of it. I mean, this is a drip, 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 but this is not a drip, drip, drip. This is a deluge. And over time, the impact is not just on consumers, but it's also on U.S. competitiveness.
Right. All right. So much to track here. Susan Schwab, former U.S. trade representative under the George W. Bush administration and now strategic advisor at Meyer Brown LLP. We thank you so much. Now, earlier today, President Trump responded to plans. The U.S. Deputy Attorney General intends to speak with Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex offender and former associate of the late disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Here are part of his remarks from the Oval Office.
Your Deputy Attorney General is reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney asking for a new interview.
Yeah, I don't know about it, but I think it's something that sounds appropriate to do, yeah.
Do you have any concern that your Deputy Attorney General, as your former attorney, would be conducting the interview, given...
No, I have no concern. He's a very talented person. He's very smart. I didn't know that they were going to do it. I don't really follow that too much.
The House Oversight Committee is now trying to subpoena Maxwell as well as lawmakers push for the so-called Epstein files to be released. Meanwhile, House Republicans are canceling floor action to prevent some controversial votes on those supposed files. Joining us now for more from Capitol Hill is Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Congressman, thanks so much for joining Bloomberg. Just to start off here, are House Republicans headed for a recess without a resolution on releasing the Epstein files?
Well, we got the resolution that we have. It just hadn't been, the leadership didn't want to release it to start the time frame, but we would have rather seen it released. But it's going to come out in time, and the resolution covers everything about, making sure disclosure takes place. President Trump has advocated for the Judicial Department to release things. So it's going to come out, and the Democrats had amendment after amendment, and it was just a grandstanding effort by them to highlight something. They think it's a wedge issue, and they think that the public is interested, and they are, and it's going to come out. But where were the Democrats 4 years ago?
Well, but I guess I'm, Congressman, trying to figure out where the sunlight is, where the daylight is between Democrats and Republicans here. We've got so many folks, especially those in the MAGA community as well, asking, what's the rush to get home here? Why not release the files? Who are you trying to protect?
Not trying to protect anybody. The files are going to come out. Resolution has been made. It hadn't been released, but it will be. and the 30-day timeline is in there. And if this had been a bill, the Democrats kept saying, well, this needs to be a bill. It would have to go through the Senate. You're talking about 2 or 3 months at best. And as far as the recess, we're what, a day early, possibly 2 days early. We need to be in the district, and we need to hear from our constituency. And the Epstein files, the public wants released, and it will be. There's nothing that's going to be hid here.
Well, to build off of this, we mentioned that the House Oversight is looking to subpoena Maxwell. This is an effort being led by one of your fellow House Freedom Caucus members, Tim Burchett. I'm wondering, when you are hearing from constituents about the release of these files, what would you need to learn from her testimony? What questions do you still have in specific?
She needs to come clean on everything. Look, we're talking about something that transcends politics. When you have 13, 14, 15-year-old girls that were abused, this transcends politics, and it all ought to be out there so that it doesn't happen again. I mean, it's happening, but this is such a publicized case, particularly with the way he died. A lot of people questioned that. And but I think it's all going to come out, maybe not as fast as people want it, but you know, it takes time to get these files. It takes time to redact those innocent victims who don't want their names released. They're part of no legal action. And I met one in the hallway that were in tears, that were trafficked years ago. And so, again, the public's going to get what they want, as they should. Transparency is the name of the game. It'll be out there.
There have been some allegations that the Speaker is trying to protect the President of the United States himself, Congressman. Have you had any assurances that Donald Trump's name is not on any client list or anywhere else in the Epstein files?
Well, first of all, the Speaker is not protecting the President. He's not protecting anybody else. Let the files speak for themselves. And again, you know, it lay dormant under the Biden administration. But now, and rightfully so, the public has a right to know. Transparency will be made. And look, the American people will render judgment if they suspect that things aren't released in due time. But I think they will be, and I think let the evidence point to whatever it will, and that's how it ought to be, and I think that's how it will be.
Including the President of the United States himself.
The President's not holding up anything. President Trump is not delaying anything. He's not withholding information. He's released the Justice Department to release everything. And that's what will be out there. And Democrats want to make an issue of it, which is fine. It's politics. But I would just say this transcends politics.
All right, Congressman, in the final few minutes we have with you, we also want to get to some other recent news. Last week, of course, we saw the passage of that rescissions package. It is our understanding it's the first of many. The administration had said that it was a trial. Can you tell us what's on the chopping block when it comes to future funding down the road?
Sure. I hope the Department of Education is one of them. You know, we've seen some of the line items. You know, that budget for the last 5 years is increased 559%. It's close to a fourth of the budget now, $270 billion. Some of the rescissions on the DEI particularly amount to a lot of money. Some of the contracts that shouldn't have been made are going to be made public, and then we'll vote on it. We'll have to vote on every rescission that puts money back in the taxpayers' coffers. And this is just one of many agencies. I think those on Social Security who are 200 years old and who are getting a check. Everything ought to be investigated. And I credit Elon Musk for identifying it and having the bandwidth to make the facts public.
I know you need to run in a moment here, Congressman, but we've heard from a lot of angry Democrats about the last rescissions package, and they say you're not going to have a partner when it comes to budgeting the next fiscal year if you're willing to claw back already approved funds. Are you worried about a shutdown if Democrats do not take part in the budgeting process after September 30th?
We haven't gotten any votes from Democrats on any type cuts, nor have they led when they had power. They believe in bigger government, more spending, and it's got this country in a bind. And now we're on the right track, and I don't expect to get their support. We hadn't been there yet, and I don't expect it down the line.
Well, don't you need their support to keep the government open?
If they shut it down, it'll be on their call, on their watch. If that's what they want, then let them do it.
We'll talk to you when we get there, I hope. Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, we thank you, sir, for being with us live, as always, on Bloomberg. Coming up, we'll get reaction from across the aisle over the Epstein files matter when Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts joins us. We'll talk about funding as well. But first, Lockheed Martin and RTX, two of the biggest defense primes in the nation, lowering their full-year profit outlook. And we'll bring you analysis on how the sector is watching the impending trade deadline next. All roads lead to tariffs on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We'll have more ammunition than any country has ever had. We're going to have more missiles than any country has ever had. We're going to have all the speedy missiles. We'll have the speedy ones, the slow ones, the accurate ones, the ones that are slightly less accurate. We have everything. But we will have more ammunition than any country has ever had. It's very important to me.
President Trump in the Oval Office today when asked about the U.S. defense industrial base and the administration's plan to stockpile ammunition. Thanks for being with us on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Tyler Kendall in Washington. President Trump's promise came on a pretty gloomy day for U.S. weapons manufacturers. The big defense names, Lockheed Martin, tumbling 11%. The most since 2021 after cutting its profit outlook for the year. RTX Corporation lowered its full-year forecast as well, also citing the impact of tariffs on the aerospace industry. After today's announcement, RTX also lowered down more than 1.5% on the day. Joining us now to break it down for us here on Balance of Power is Will Lee, aerospace and defense analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Will, it's great to have you. Can you walk us through the impact that these tariffs are having on the defense sector?
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on the show. So in terms of with the U.S. defense contractors, they have limited headwinds since there's the military duty-free exemptions for certain goods imported under government contracts. So Lockheed on today's call indicated headwinds of about $100 million in second quarter, or about half a percentage point of sales and about 4% of adjusted profit. Northrop also talked about minimal impact. It directly sources a small part of its supply chain, amounting to about 5% of its total spend, so less than $1 billion. That's subject to tariffs. And if I do some back of the envelope math, take the $1 billion, apply 30% tariff, I get about a $300 million hit, which is roughly about also 0.5% of sales and about 7% of segment EBIT. And then Raytheon, they actually are now targeting a tariff cost of about $500 million, down from its prior expectation of $850 million, as the company mitigates its headwinds by expanding the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that allows for duty-free imports using the military exemptions that I previously mentioned, and then also maximizing the free trade zones. So also similar to Lockheed with Northrop, it's about 0.5 percentage point of sales and about 5% of segment profit.
All right, Will Lee of Bloomberg Intelligence, we thank you so much. Joe, of course, this is something that we watch very closely here, particularly when it comes to revitalizing the defense industrial base.
Yeah, that's for sure. And apparently there's a lot of work still there to be done. But of course, you need capital to do that. And these companies are feeling the pinch when it comes to profit margins. We have yet to hear from a couple of other defense contractors this week, and we'll keep tabs on these as we make our way through the week.
And coming up, we'll have more on this story and what's happening next in the House. This is Bloomberg Television and Radio.
The president has said clearly, and he has now ordered his DOJ to do what it is we've all needed DOJ to do for years now, and that is to get everything released. So they're in the process of that. There's no purpose for Congress to push an administration to do something that they're already doing. And so this is for political games. We can both call for full transparency and also protect victims. And if you run roughshod or you do it too quickly, that's not what happens.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson this afternoon on his decision to send members home a day early for their summer recess. The move avoids any controversial votes over the potential release of government files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Joining us now with the details here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio is Bloomberg's Erik Wasson. He's live on Capitol Hill. Erik, the House has a lot to do, including appropriations. How is this complicating workloads up there on the Hill?
you know, it's really clear that Republicans are fleeing town early just to avoid these votes. The Rules Committee needs to meet to set up any major legislation, and the Democrats have really basically tortured Republicans with amendment votes, threatened amendment votes on the Epstein matter. Republicans cobbled together a non-binding resolution to basically encourage the administration to release everything, but even that's not coming to a vote. As the Speaker said, they want to defer to Trump and give him more space, but Republicans are eager to avoid the issue. Indeed, the appropriations process really does loom for both the House and the Senate. Only 20 or so legislative days before a potential government shutdown on October 1st. We're looking at a Senate vote right now to see if Democrats are going to sort of play along and try to cobble together a bipartisan deal, or angered by the White House's moves to sort of impound funds and rescind funds on a partisan basis, reject that and sort of create a crisis situation.
Is Chuck Schumer on the same page as Hakeem Jeffries when it comes to that, Erik? We've been talking to Democratic lawmakers, and it seems like the temperature's going up on this since the rescission package passed. Becca Balint last night seemed to make it pretty clear that she was willing to vote for a government shutdown at the end of September. What are you hearing?
Well, that was the real issue in March. We saw the House Democrats stick together to say that they're not going to continue funding in the face of these administration actions and DOGE cuts that they viewed as illegal. But Chuck Schumer allowed a certain number of Senate Democrats to vote for that continuing resolution, that stopgap bill that's funding the government currently. They're trying to get on the same page. There will be a meeting tonight between Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer to come up with a strategy, but it's a tricky one. My sense is that they're going to allow, the military construction bill, the Veterans Affairs bill to start debate, but they're going to want some kind of commitment, some kind of agreement from Republican leaders that they're not going to do more of these one-off rescission packages, that they're not going to back the administration on impoundment. And that's going to be a very hard commitment for Republicans to make.
Always great to have you, Erik. Bloomberg's Erik Wasson live on Capitol Hill. We thank you. The whole Jeffrey Epstein story has captivated Washington and is, in fact, impacting business on Capitol Hill. Just moments ago, we talked about it with Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Here's what he said in responding to House leadership's decision here to have an early dismissal to avoid a vote around the Epstein files controversy. Listen.
Not trying to protect anybody. The files are going to come out. Resolution has been made. It hadn't been released, but it will be. And the 30-day timeline is in there. And if this had been a bill, the Democrats kept saying, well, this needs to be a bill. It would have to go through the Senate. You're talking about 2 or 3 months at best. And as far as the recess, we're, a day early? Possibly 2 days early. We need to be in the district, and we need to hear from our constituency. And the Epstein files, the public wants released, and it will be. There's nothing that's going to be hid here.
Of course, they could all be dealing with some chippy town hall meetings when they get home to the district. Tyler, that's, of course, the point of the August recess, and indeed, it looks like lawmakers are heading out of town. Joining us now, though, is one lawmaker still in Washington. Joining us live from Capitol Hill, Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Congressman, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. We spent a lot more time talking about Jeffrey Epstein than any particular policy this hour, and I'm wondering what you're hearing. What's going on here? I thought Republicans wanted to expose these files, and it looks like everybody's going home.
Americans perceive that there's one set of rules for the powerful and one set of rules for the average American. And that's confirmed when they look at Donald Trump protecting Jeffrey Epstein. And it's also confirmed when they see Secretary Kennedy, who pledges radical transparency and then refuses to require his top aide, Callie Means, to issue conflict of interest reports, despite the fact that Callie Means is running his own business on the side that's benefiting from Health and Human Services policy. Same thing with Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, who's shilling his own cryptocurrencies in the Middle East while administration policy benefits his Tether empire. So Americans are tired of the corruption and grift they're seeing in Washington, D.C., and they want a forceful response from Democrats to address the corruption and corporate capture.
Well, Congressman, we mentioned earlier on the program that the House Oversight Committee is looking to get a subpoena to get some testimony from Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm wondering if you're in support of that and what sort of additional information that you're looking for that you would want to hear from her potential testimony.
I'm in support of a transparent, impartial investigation, including the resolution from Representative Khanna to require the disclosure of the investigation files. And then I'm also in favor of Congress addressing this issue and then moving on to issues that affect cost of living, financial freedom for Americans. We have legislation bipartisan that lowers the cost of prescription drugs for Americans that should have passed the House in December, but Elon Musk killed it. We should pass it right now before we go on recess. We've got bipartisan legislation that I've helped to draft that would take on fentanyl importing from China. Bipartisan, we should pass that now before we go on recess. And these are issues that I think affect Americans in their daily lives and that we need to address right now.
Well, we've been talking with a lot of upset Democrats, Congressman, since the rescissions package passed. Ralph Norman just told us there's another rescissions package coming. The White House has promised this as well, following the passage of the president's big, beautiful bill that, of course, Democrats did not support. Are you prepared to part ways with Republicans and allow the government to shut down? Or will you, in fact, sit down at the table and consider a deal when a budget is written with a Republican majority in the House?
Well, let's look at the impact of the last rescissions package. Elon Musk came in with Doge, pledged $1 trillion in savings. He was going to mail checks to the American people. They were going to make government more efficient. What have they done? They've cost American taxpayers more than $100 billion. And then the rescissions package had $9 billion in savings that gutted public broadcasting and polio vaccines. So thanks to Doge, we have taken on polio vaccines. Great. So this next rescissions package, I'm sure, is going to be as incompetent and cruel. And Democrats stand by a bipartisan appropriations process. But if the Republicans are going to go through the back door and negate those deals through partisan rescissions packages, then it's very hard to negotiate in good faith. And that's exactly what they're pledging to do.
But, Congressman, so just for clarity, do you think that Democrats should be risking a shutdown here in order to get their negotiating leverage? At this point, is this inevitable?
Of course I want to fund the government, and I want to fund the government through a bipartisan appropriations process. That gives Congress more power over the executive and allow us to set funding levels that are appropriate to the needs of the American people. The challenge that Democrats have right now, just to be very clear, is we can work in a bipartisan way to pass a funding deal. But then Republicans, in a partisan way, can do a rescissions package that negates the funding that had hitherto been agreed. So you can see the catch-22 that Democrats are in. It's like, okay, we shake hands on a Tuesday and you stab us in the back on a Wednesday. We're getting a little tired of that game.
Well, it's been an interesting game listening to the conversations around Jeffrey Epstein. Not that I'm going back to that, Congressman, but the president has been talking about a lot of things, likely in an effort, we keep hearing, to change the subject. And today he went back to the Russia investigation and involving election interference in the 2016 and 2020 elections, calling out former President Obama. He called him a traitor. He also talked about James Comey, Hillary Clinton, and some other members of the former administration. Speaker Johnson says he has no concern when it comes to compelling testimony from President Obama regarding what the President of the United States now calls the Russia hoax allegations. What's your response to that kind of language and the potential for a subpoena for former President Obama?
Grossly inappropriate, of course, and in pattern with President Trump's knee-jerk reflex to every issue, which is to blame somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault with Donald Trump, right? It's just this one long litany of grievances. It's pathetic. When it comes to Russia, what I hope Donald Trump would do is stop looking at 2016 and start looking at 2025 when Russia is bombing Ukraine and is trying to open up a second front against NATO in the Western Balkans. He needs to get strong against Vladimir Putin. That means seizing the 300 billion euros in frozen assets held in Brussels and appropriating that towards Ukrainian defense. That means authorizing long-range strikes against Russian oil refineries. That means tightening sanctions and price caps against Russian oil exports, which funds their war machine. It's time to demonstrate some strength as opposed to supplication to Vladimir Putin, because frankly, the Kremlin right now is looking at the U.S. national security team, and it looks like a junior varsity squad.
Well, let's actually build on that, because President Trump has threatened that there could be a so-called secondary sanction on those countries that buy or import Russian oil. We're looking at how that could potentially impact China and India, for example. Is that the sort of escalation that you would be in support of?
it's hard to take the president seriously. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, I am glad that the President of the United States recognizes that NATO is our ally and Russia is our enemy. It is promising that he is talking about secondary sanctions and getting tough on their oil exports. But the problem is when he changes his mind every 24 hours based on what he sees on Fox and Friends or whatever Vladimir Putin texts him, he doesn't actually signal strength. The Kremlin needs to understand that they are facing an enemy in Ukraine that is going to be armed for the long haul and is going to have the support of NATO to create a military-industrial complex in Eastern Europe. And right now, they don't see that with Donald Trump. They see somebody who vacillates and supplicates himself.
When you head home to Newtonville on your August recess, Congressman, will you be able to look voters in the eyes, tell them that Democrats can help avoid a government shutdown?
Yes, Democrats have been negotiating on appropriations in good faith over the last two administrations, in fact. And we're the ones who want to see responsible funding levels for programs and services that Americans rely upon. Republicans are the ones who just cut Medicaid for 10 million Americans. That's going to raise health insurance premiums on tens of millions of more Americans who get their insurance through their employers. So when it comes to supporting the programs that Americans rely on for stable government, Democrats are the ones they should count on.
All right, Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, we thank you so much for joining Bloomberg. And coming up, President Trump is planning to withdraw from UNESCO again, saying that the organization doesn't serve U.S. interests. Plus, the exclusive reporting on Elon Musk and his potential return to politics. We'll bring you all those details next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Joe Matthew. I'm Tyler Kendall. We have our political panel on hand to discuss some of the big stories of the day, including the scrutiny over Jeffrey Epstein, trade talks, and more. But first, some of the other stories we're tracking in today's Power Brief. First, President Trump announced plans to once again withdraw the U.S. from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. This was a decision originally made during his first term, but then reversed by the Biden administration. A spokesperson for the White House cited ideological concerns, saying UNESCO, quote, supports woke, divisive cultural and social causes that are totally out of step with the common sense policies Americans voted for. In addition to UNESCO, President Trump has targeted other UN agencies such as the World Health Organization and the Human Rights Council for potential withdrawal.
Next, Microsoft is accusing Chinese state-sponsored hackers of using flaws in its SharePoint document management software in a global hacking campaign. A source telling Bloomberg that the hackers targeted the U.S. Education Department, Florida's Department of Revenue, and the Rhode Island General Assembly. Governmental systems in Europe and the Middle East were also targeted. In a statement, the Chinese embassy says it condemns all cyber attacks but urged caution at placing blame without solid evidence. Microsoft has since released patches for these vulnerabilities.
And Alina Habba, the interim U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey, will be replaced after the expiration of her 120-day appointment. In an order released today, New Jersey's top federal judge declined to extend Habba's tenure, naming First Assistant U.S. Attorney Desiree Lee Grace as the successor. Habba's time in office included several high-profile cases against Democratic politicians and also the dismissal of a long-running overseas corruption inquiry. Habba previously served as a personal defense lawyer for President Trump and as White House counselor during the first Trump administration.
And Bloomberg is exclusively reporting a potential return to politics for, yes, Elon Musk, as you can see on Bloomberg TV, after SpaceX tucked into its tender offer a warning for investors. When it comes to Doge, Musk may, quote, serve in similar roles and devote significant time and energy to such roles, unquote. That according to documents reviewed by Bloomberg News. The story comes after the Wall Street Journal reported that Musk was partnering with Valor Equity Partners to raise up to $12 billion for XAI chips as the startup burns through cash. Joining us now with reaction to this story and a lot more, this evening's political panel. Lester Munson is here, Republican strategist and principal managing director of the international practice at BGR Group. He's joined alongside Democratic strategist Megan Hayes, the former special assistant to President Biden. Great to see both of you here. We talked about this possibility before. Lester, you excited to have Elon Musk back in the fold?
I don't think he really left the fold. He was in the White House. He was the first friend. He seemed to be involved in every single thing. We saw a picture of him there with the president of Argentina.
He didn't leave the fold. They were insulting each other for quite a while.
Oh, but isn't that part of the thing?
I don't
know. Like, there's got to be ups and downs. There's got to be conflict. This is all part of the narrative arc, if you will. Now he's got a new party he's starting, the America Party. Yeah. I feel like, we've all gotten to know him a little better. Okay. It's great.
Well, Megan, what do you make of this? Because Elon Musk was, of course, the largest U.S. political donor the last election cycle. Is there any room for perhaps Democrats to capitalize on this?
I mean, sure, the water is warm. Come on over. I think anyone who's willing to fight for the American people and bring down costs, and if that's Elon Musk, then I think Democrats would welcome his help there.
Well, he actually did promise to primary some MAGA candidates, maybe even the president himself. Is he a friend or a foe to this White House?
Yes.
Okay. The America Party.
The America Party. And will he actually get involved in primaries? Boy, that would be kind of interesting. And there is this real schism in the MAGA movement between the fiscal conservatives and the people who are more likely to support Trump's budget. Yeah. That is a real thing. Will Elon Musk actually go there and try to exploit that, putting all of his business ventures at risk, presumably, or at least at greater risk than they are now? Very interesting political question.
Well, I do want to capitalize on this idea of primaries. We're looking ahead, of course, to the midterms. One of the big stories that we've been tracking all week has to do with redistricting. And, of course, that's in Texas. But we've also heard from the California governor, Gavin Newsom, that maybe Democrats, I think his quote was, "two can play this game." Megan, what are you watching for? I'd love your opinion on this, coming, of course, from an administration's view. When you have the White House asking a state to redistrict, is this a viable option here for Democrats to take advantage of, even if they don't currently hold the executive branch?
They absolutely should. This is up to the states to redistrict. I know California has an independent commission that can redistrict, but Democrats need to take advantage, too. This is not something that should just be left to Republicans to do. If this is a game we're going to play and we're going to redistrict during off years of the census, then Democrats should do it, too. Absolutely.
So I think one of the lines from Gavin Newsom was, we can play hardball, too, right? And Donald Trump seems to be ready to play some hardball with Barack Obama. I don't know if you heard this today, Lester, but when he was asked about the Jeffrey Epstein situation, he said, "You're covering the wrong story. The real witch hunt," he says, "involves names from the past." Here was the president's response when asked about this today in the Oval.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that. After what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people.
We should note there's no reporting that anyone outside of the president really believes this. In fact, his own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, signed off on the idea that Russia was to blame for election interference. But it wasn't just Barack Obama. He said Comey, Biden, Clapper were all there. He mentioned Hillary Clinton, and he went on to say, it's time to go after people, Lester. What's he talking about?
Well, I think he's trying to divert people's attention from the Epstein matter, which seems to be more pertinent at the moment. I will say, I think there's a little bit of smoke on this Russia stuff, and I think Democrats were being very political in a lot of the oversight they were doing, a lot of the statements about that stuff. I don't think any of it really bordered on the criminal, like the president was asserting. But it's a little bit sketchy what was going on there. But this is clearly an attempt to divert from the Epstein story, which I think at the end of the day has a longer narrative arc, if you will, on in the American public attention. This is something that's not going away. It's going to be hard to really use a little razzmatazz here to divert people from that story.
Not the Russian,
on the Epstein story, yes.
Megan, I'd love your take on this, too, including the little bit of smoke that we just heard from Lester, as well as how this dovetails into this bigger idea that some of these stories are starting to dominate a news cycle where we really have seen some tangible progress forward on actual legislation.
I mean, yes, the Epstein thing, this is what they campaigned on. This is what his base wanted. And so when you run on something and then say you're not going to do it, that is a problem for your base. They are very loud. This story is not going away. There's no bottom to it. This is a death by 1,000 cuts. They're going every day there is something new. I mean, Mike Johnson is literally releasing the House early so they don't have to take a vote on this because there's members of the Republican Party. So I think Donald Trump is trying to throw anyone out there that he can to get the the spotlight off of him, and now he's using Barack Obama, and it's just not going to work. It was interesting that the Obama office put out a statement today, which they very rarely do, basically saying this is absurd and foolish, and don't look over here when the real issue is Donald Trump and his relationship to Epstein.
We can show you that statement. It reads, out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response, but these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. It says these bizarre allegations are ridiculous in a weak attempt at distraction. Fact the matter is, Lester, this Epstein thing is getting into a lot of corners in Washington. They can't even go on the House floor to vote on a couple of bills that would have made no news because of Democrats' demands last evening in the Rules Committee to get a floor vote on releasing the Epstein files. We just talked to Ralph Norman about it. He says it's coming out. Is he right?
Yeah, I think so. This is not going to go away. You can't put this. You can't hide this. You can't put baby in the corner. You can't put the Jeffrey Epstein story in a corner. I think the other thing we should note here is kind of the Tulsi Gabbard resurgence here in Trump world. Give her a little bit of credit for being very creative in a way to get back in the president's good graces after she kind of mishandled the Iran question about a month ago, and he said he didn't really believe anything she was saying. Now she seems to be back in good odor with the president.
Megyn, just in our last minute here, I would also like to get your thoughts on what is brewing when it comes to the appropriations process. We've been asking Democrats if they're willing to shut down the government over this. Do you think that this is a viable path for them to get some sort of negotiating leverage as we try to look ahead to funding the government?
So I don't think that they should shut down the government unless they have a way to reopen it. So if they don't have a way to get the government reopened, they do not have leverage to shut it down. Democrats will be blamed for this going into the midterms. They right now are holding the upper hand with the big, beautiful bill, and the messaging component there is really in Democrats' favor of cutting health care for 17 million people and cutting health benefit or food benefits for folks. So I do not think it is a smart option for them to use. What they choose to do is, obviously I'm not in Congress, but it is not a smart option to do something if you do not have a way to reopen.
What do you think about that? Are we shutting down?
I don't think we're shutting down. Also, it's way too early to tell.
Fair enough. Although the drumbeat's getting louder here. Lester and Megyn seem to agree on this one.
All right, it's one that we're going to, of course, watch to tonight's political panel. Lester Munson and Megyn Hayes, we thank you both so much. And a quick programming note, make sure to tune in to Bloomberg's brand new series, Longevity, with David Rubenstein, focused on examining one of the most urgent and captivating questions of our time. How can we live longer and better? You can catch the premiere tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Television.
As we consider our own mortality, we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power with Tyler Kendall. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg. We'll see you back here tomorrow.